Primitive Life, a novel by Louise Richardson. Chapter 4, Fire and Flood. Back to Gray Mama. We will see eventually how these two very disparate stories converge. Chapter 4, Fire and Flood. History tends to repeat itself in uncanny ways, although never in exactly the same way. In the ancient Great Rift Valley, Gray Mama gathered 3 babies and fled the blazing twin towering baobab trees. The innocents tightly gripped her fur for dear life, but she ignored the pain. She and the other female walking chimps and some adolescent males evacuated the small ones. They didn't stop running in the sheeting rain until they reached the East River. They could not cross the flood. They didn't need to cross the flood. They had enough distance from the fire now. They watched their beloved towers fall in pieces. They were too far away now to see any detail. That was all for the best. Gray Mama knew there were walking chimps in those trees, some on lookout, some enjoying a morning climb. She knew there were friends, family members in those trees, and under them when they fell in conflagration. Even as the downpour began, she saw many familiar faces high up there as she collected the tiny ones. She visualized the resignation on the faces as chimps leapt knowingly to their deaths to escape the flames. She and her helpers tried to keep the babies from seeing all this. She would never be able to keep the nightmares away from them. She would never be able to bring back the mommies of some, the siblings and playmates of others. She would not have been able to explain what happened, even if the walking chimps had evolved language. All she or any of them knew was that lightning struck one tree and spread to the other. She did not know why the grown males were all off over the hill and to the edge of the territory. None of the males knew why at first themselves. Even Dull, the dim alpha male, did not know why. Some of the old school walking chimps in his inner circle, though, would pound on a trunk of the burned baobab and give the cry which meant enemy to everyone in the troop. Australopithecus afarensis did not have the full human capacity for language yet, but they did have a vocabulary of calls, just like other primates in Africa, and a much more extensive collection of them at that. His beta male, Creepy, pulled him along, grunting enemy until he could see where they were going. They all followed Dull to find Nasty and his troop. They would kill them all for burning their beloved baobab trees, and only incidentally their beloved community members. Why Creepy blamed Nasty and his henchman, Gray Mama, would never understand. Walking chimps knew nothing of fire. It would be 3 or 4 million years before Prometheus or somebody discovered that not only does fire come from the heavens, but that mortals can make it themselves. But even millions of years later, strangers, foreigners, would be easy scapegoats for those in power. Hating strangers could keep them in power. But Gray Mama knew strangers can be kind. She was once like these innocents clinging to her fur, a victim of disaster. And when her own family gave her up for dead, it was strangers who raised her as one of their own. It was a flood far worse than the one before her now. After a prolonged dry season, the plain, the pen, in the vicinity of the twin towering baobab trees had become a shallow but rushing and churning sea of mud and debris. The community was trying to cross it before things got any worse. Things got worse when Grandmama's mother and her only brother and she in her mother's arms were a giraffe's neck length from the near bank. Many a walking chimp was swept along in the torrent. Her brother was. Her mother tried to reach him, but he disappeared just beyond the bend downstream. Grandmama, who was tender baby way back then, shrieked when a wall of flood slammed her mommy and herself to the sandy bottom. She shrieked louder when a thorny acacia limb wrapped the side of her mother's neck and scratched tender baby's tender brow ridge. She gulped muddy water, trying to squeal when the next wave tore her from her mother's arms. Mommy lunged for tender baby and caught her little fingertips. Trying to stand against the onslaught, her mother turned for the near bank with her regained little prize. Then, just when they were about to her mother's arm's length away from the bank, the flash flood broke through its temporary natural dam upstream and flushed the entire valley of the towering twin baobab trees, fanning out across the pan and splitting mother from daughter against the anvil of a hidden boulder. The spreading flood took mommy downstream and tender baby to the edge of the bank. Tender baby grasped a bush and a clump of grass in her strong baby chimp grips and held tight, coughing and vomiting muddy water and finally squealing for her mother, who had washed away beyond her sight, beyond her life. Just then she felt strong mommy arms take her up and pull her from the flood's edge. It was her mother. No, it was a stranger. A kind stranger who apparently had trouble walking because she could not take a step without touching the knuckles of her free left hand to the ground. Tender baby cried a chimp cry for her mother. She screamed in desperation. She hooted for all she was worth, but her mommy could not hear her now as she and her rescuer joined a half-dozen knuckle walkers ambling away as fast as feet and knuckles could take them to higher ground and far away from the flood, far away from tender baby's mother, and far away from the community of the twin towering baobab trees. Now Grandmama sighed for her lost mother, even 2 generations later, as she set down the heaviest of her 3 charges, a 4-year-old whose mother had just appeared, joyfully kissing and stroking the child, and his baby sister handed over to the relieved female. The kind mother reached out for the still clinging orphaned infant who was reluctant to release her vice-like grip on Grandmama's fur. Finally, she coaxed it away from Grandmama. The vice-like grip was transferred to the kind mother's fur. Grandmama knew the infant's own mother had been crushed by fiery falling branches of the venerable baobabs. She knew the kind mother would raise the infant as her own, if the baby would take to the foster mother's milk. It finally hit Grandmama like the flood that had torn her from her own mother's fur, that her almost grown son Climber must have been one of the first burning bodies to drop, like flaming fruit, from that north tower. Had he lived, he would have proved a prime candidate for alpha male. Grandmama did not see her younger son Drummer among the ashes. Perhaps he had escaped, perhaps not. She would not know until the survivors of the community gathered by the shore of the river in the sunset. At least the fire was out and the rain had stopped for now. End of Chapter 4, Fire and Flood, Primitive Life, a novel by Louise Richardson.